If you found your way here, there's a reason your attention stopped for a moment. Not because some dramatic thunderbolt split the sky. Not because life suddenly whispered your name out loud. Usually the real signs don't arrive like that. They come quietly, almost too quietly. Like a small knock behind the ribs. Like a sentence you read twice because something in it feels strangely personal. Like a video that appears at the exact time when you're tired of pretending everything is fine. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe nobody around you can see it, because on the outside, you still look normal. You still answer messages. You still do what needs to be done. You still laugh when people expect you to laugh. You still show up. But inside, something has changed. Something doesn't fit anymore. The life you've been carrying feels like a jacket from an old version of you. Familiar, yes, but too tight around the chest. You can still wear it, but you can't breathe in it. That's the sign, not the angel number, not the dream, not the random quote on your feed. Those may be little confirmations along the way, sure. But the real sign is deeper than that. The real sign is the quiet discomfort that refuses to leave. The strange sadness that comes even when nothing is technically wrong. The exhaustion that sleep can't fix. The feeling that you're not lost because you failed, but because you've outgrown the map you were given. And that's a strange thing to realize, isn't it? Because most people are taught to fear discomfort. If something hurts, numb it. If something feels uncertain, avoid it. If the soul starts asking questions, bury it under work, entertainment, food, scrolling, noise, another plan, another goal, another distraction. Modern life is brilliant at keeping people busy enough to never meet themselves. It gives the mind 1,000 little candies, so the heart never asks for bread. But chosen one, listen carefully. That ache inside you isn't here to punish you, it's here to interrupt you. Life sometimes has to disturb the surface before it can reveal what's underneath. A seed doesn't become a tree because everything stays comfortable. It breaks, it opens, it loses the shape it once had. And from the outside, that process might look like destruction. But from the inside, it's becoming. Right now, part of you may feel like you're falling apart, but maybe what's falling apart is only the version of you that was built to survive in rooms where you couldn't be fully yourself. Maybe the mask is cracking because your real face wants air. Maybe the reason you feel so tired is not because you're weak, but because you've been performing a life that was never meant to hold your spirit. There comes a moment when the soul stops negotiating. For years it may whisper. It may send small signals through restlessness, irritation, boredom, tension, strange dreams, sudden emotional waves, or that heavy feeling in your chest when you imagine spending the next 10 years the same way. And for a while, you can ignore those whispers. Most people do. They call it stress. They call it adulthood. They call it just life. But one day the whisper becomes a bell, and suddenly you can't unknow what you know. You can't keep pretending that a relationship is love when it drains the color from your spirit. You can't keep calling a job security when it slowly buries your aliveness. You can't keep smiling through conversations that make your soul feel invisible. You can't keep shrinking yourself just to make other people comfortable. Something inside you starts saying, softly but firmly, enough. Not with anger, not with drama, just truth, enough. And when that word rises from the deepest part of you, life begins to change. Not always outside at first. Sometimes the room looks the same. The people look the same. The schedule looks the same. But your relationship to everything changes. What used to satisfy you now feels empty. What used to distract you now feels dull. What used to scare you now starts looking like a doorway. That's when the sign becomes impossible to ignore, because the sign you've been waiting for isn't an event. It's the moment you realize you can no longer betray yourself and call it peace. There's a reason your old life feels different now. It may not be because anything outside has changed. That's the confusing part. Same house, same streets, same phone, same responsibilities, same people asking the same questions. Yet something inside you is standing in a different place, looking at it all with new eyes. A room can feel like home for years, then suddenly feel like a waiting room. A path can feel safe for a long time, then one morning feel like a cage. A version of yourself can get you through painful seasons, and then, almost overnight, become the very thing that suffocates you. That doesn't mean you were wrong before. Please understand that. The old version of you was not stupid. It was not fake in some simple way. It was doing what it knew how to do. It learned how to survive. It learned how to please. It learned how to avoid conflict. It learned when to stay quiet, when to smile, when to work harder, when to hide certain feelings, when to pretend certain things didn't hurt. That version protected you. But protection can become a prison when the danger has passed and the door still stays locked. Maybe you were once praised for being easygoing, so you learned to silence your needs. Maybe you were rewarded for being responsible, so you forgot how to be free. Maybe people admired your strength, so you never gave yourself permission to fall apart. Maybe everyone loved the version of you that didn't ask for too much, didn't change too fast, didn't make anyone uncomfortable. And now that version is tired. Not just physically tired, soul tired. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from being too little of yourself for too long. It comes from waking up every day and putting on a personality that keeps the peace, but kills the truth. It comes from choosing the acceptable answer instead of the honest one. It comes from living inside someone else's idea of what your life should be. People may call that maturity, but deep down, you know the difference between maturity and self-abandonment. Maturity makes you steadier. Self-abandonment makes you numb. Maturity teaches patience. Self-abandonment teaches silence. Maturity helps you build a life with wisdom. Self-abandonment convinces you to stay in a life where your spirit is slowly disappearing. So when your old life starts feeling too small, don't rush to shame yourself. Don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. A snake doesn't hate its old skin when it sheds it. The old skin served a purpose. It held the body until the body needed more room. But once growth begins, staying inside what once protected you becomes painful. Your discomfort is not always a problem. Sometimes it's evidence of growth, and growth has a way of ruining illusions. Suddenly, you notice how many conversations are just noise. You notice how often people talk about everything except what matters. You notice how much of normal life is built around distraction. Work until you're drained. Buy something to feel better. Scroll until your mind goes blank. Sleep, repeat, then call it stability. But stability without meaning becomes a decorated cage. There's an old saying often attributed to ancient wisdom. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And whether or not those exact words came from where people say they did, the truth inside them remains sharp. The life you're looking for is usually hidden behind the fear you keep avoiding. Not because suffering is noble, not because struggle should be romanticized, but because the parts of you that hold your power are often buried in the places where you learned to hide. That's why your life feels strange right now. You're being invited to retrieve yourself, not the polished self, not the approved self, not the useful self, the real one, the one who still knows what feels true, the one who remembers what your heart sounded like before the world got loud, the one who doesn't want to perform anymore. And yes, this can make you feel lonely at first, because when your inner world begins changing, you may not have the words to explain it. People might ask, "What's wrong?" And the honest answer is too big for casual conversation. How do you explain that nothing is wrong, but everything feels false? How do you tell someone you're not sad in the ordinary way? You're waking up from a life that kept you asleep. Most won't understand. That's okay. A person still sleeping will always think the one waking up is disturbing the peace. But chosen one, your peace was never meant to be numbness. Your peace was meant to be alignment, and alignment begins the moment you stop confusing comfort with truth. Pain has a language, but most people never learn how to listen to it. They only learn how to escape it, push it down, explain it away, distract from it, make it look prettier, turn it into a joke, turn it into productivity, turn it into, "I'm fine." But pain doesn't disappear just because it's ignored. It waits. Sometimes it waits in the body as tension. Sometimes it waits in the mind as overthinking. Sometimes it waits in the heart as a dull heaviness that follows you even on good days. Pain is patient like that. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits beside you until you finally ask, "What are you trying to show me?" And maybe that's the question that changes everything. Because the pain you're feeling may not be here to destroy you. It may be trying to tell you where your life has gone out of alignment. Think of a smoke alarm. Nobody hears a smoke alarm and says, "What a terrible sound. Let's destroy the alarm." Maybe at 3 a.m, when toast betrayed someone, that thought appears for a second. But still, the alarm isn't the real problem. It's pointing to something that needs attention. Emotional pain works in a similar way. Anxiety may be saying, "You're living against yourself." Emptiness may be saying, "You've been feeding everything except your soul." Anger may be saying, "A boundary was crossed too many times." Sadness may be saying, "Something in you needs to be mourned before something new can be born." Restlessness may be saying, "There's more for you, and you know it." When you stop treating every uncomfortable feeling as an enemy, your inner world becomes less frightening, not easy, not instantly peaceful, but more honest. And honesty is where healing begins. Chosen one, there's a specific kind of suffering that comes when your spirit can no longer fit inside the identity you built for survival. It feels like collapse, but it's actually pressure. Like the pressure under the earth before a spring breaks through stone. Like the pressure inside a cocoon before wings become possible. Nobody looking at a cocoon would call it beautiful from the outside. It looks still, tight, closed, maybe even dead. But inside, a quiet miracle is taking place. The old form is dissolving. The creature is becoming something it has never been before. And if someone cuts it open too early to help, the transformation fails. Some seasons are not meant to be rushed. Some pain is not meant to be instantly fixed. Sometimes you're not supposed to go back to who you were before the ache began. Sometimes the ache is the doorway into who you were meant to become. That's why going back to normal may not feel right anymore. Normal was the place where you abandoned yourself politely. Normal was the place where you kept quiet when your spirit wanted to speak. Normal was the place where you stayed small, because being fully alive would have disturbed people who benefited from your silence. So no, the answer may not be to return to normal. The answer may be to pass through the fire without worshipping the flames. There's a difference. You don't need to glorify pain. You don't need to build an identity around being wounded. You don't need to prove your depth by staying in darkness longer than necessary. But you do need to listen. You do need to ask what the pain is pointing toward. You do need to stop running from the one conversation your soul has been trying to have with you, because the pain becomes heavier when it has to chase you. Once you turn toward it, something softens, not always immediately, but gradually. The monster under the bed becomes a wounded part of you asking for light. The fear in your chest becomes a compass. The confusion becomes a sign that an old certainty is dissolving. And that's not failure, that's initiation. A deeper life doesn't begin when everything is comfortable. It begins when you finally become honest enough to admit that the comfortable life is no longer alive. And here's where it gets interesting. Once you begin listening to the pain instead of escaping it, you start noticing strange alignments. Certain words reach you differently. Certain people appear at precise moments. Certain songs hit a hidden place in you. Certain dreams stay with you long after waking. The world begins to feel less random, not because everything is magically arranged like a movie, but because your attention is finally awake enough to recognize meaning. Meaning was always speaking. You were just too busy surviving to hear it. Signs rarely shout. They don't usually come dressed in gold, with fireworks and a clear instruction manual. Most signs are subtle, a delay that saves you from the wrong road, a rejection that quietly redirects you, a sentence from a stranger that lands too deeply to be ordinary, a sudden memory that returns with a lesson you weren't ready to understand before. Some signs feel gentle, others feel like doors closing in your face, and that's where many people get confused. They think a sign must feel good. They think guidance should always arrive as comfort, ease, or confirmation. But sometimes the sign you've been waiting for is not a green light. Sometimes it's the exhaustion you feel after betraying yourself again. Sometimes it's the heavy silence after a conversation where your truth stayed trapped in your throat. Sometimes it's the repeated pattern that keeps returning because you still haven't learned what it came to teach. Life is not always cruel when it repeats a lesson. Sometimes repetition is mercy. A person may ignore one small leak in the ceiling for months. A tiny stain appears, then a drip, then a wider mark. Then one day water pours through and suddenly the problem can no longer be postponed. The collapse feels sudden, but the warnings were there. Your soul works like that too. It sends little leaks before the flood. A discomfort here, a dream there, a friendship that no longer feels honest, a goal that once excited you, but now feels strangely lifeless, a place where your energy drops every time you enter, a person whose presence makes your body tense before your mind can explain why. Pay attention to what your body knows before your pride argues with it. Pay attention to what keeps draining you. Pay attention to what you keep trying to justify. Pay attention to the version of yourself you become around certain people. Those are signs, not always mystical, not always dramatic, but real. Chosen one, your path is not asking you to become superstitious. You don't need to turn every feather, number, or coincidence into a prophecy. That can become another trap. The mind can get addicted to signs when it's afraid to make decisions. It keeps asking for one more confirmation, one more message, one more proof, because choosing would mean taking responsibility. Guidance is beautiful, but guidance is not a replacement for courage. At some point, the sign has already come. At some point, asking for another sign becomes a way of delaying the leap. And maybe that's the uncomfortable truth. Maybe you're not waiting because you don't know. Maybe you're waiting because knowing requires action. Deep down, you may already understand which relationship is over, which habit is weakening you, which environment keeps shrinking you, which dream keeps calling you, which truth you keep avoiding because speaking it would change everything. The sign isn't missing. The obedience to the sign is missing. And no, obedience here doesn't mean blind submission. It means listening to the deeper intelligence within you. It means honoring the quiet truth that has been patient with you for so long. It means admitting, yes, I know what my soul has been trying to tell me. That admission can be terrifying, because once you admit you know, you can't hide behind confusion anymore. But don't rush into chaos just to prove you're brave. Real transformation doesn't always mean quitting everything tomorrow, ending every relationship in one dramatic scene, or burning your old life to the ground. Sometimes the first act of courage is smaller, cleaner, more honest, a boundary, a conversation, a decision, a morning routine that brings you back to yourself, a promise to stop laughing at jokes that disrespect you, a refusal to keep explaining your pain to people committed to misunderstanding it, a private moment where you finally say, I can't keep living against myself. Small choices are not small when they return you to your soul. One stone moved from the path can change the direction of a river. And as you begin making those choices, the signs become clearer. Not because life suddenly starts speaking, but because you stop interrupting it with fear. The inner noise quiets, the body relaxes around truth. The heart, bruised but still loyal, begins to trust you again. That's when the next doorway appears, and almost always it appears in the place you were most afraid to look. Fear is not always a stop sign. Sometimes fear is a guard standing in front of the gate you need to enter. Of course, not every fear should be ignored. If a fire is burning, fear is wisdom. If danger is real, fear protects. But there's another kind of fear, the kind that rises when your old identity feels threatened. The fear of being judged, the fear of disappointing people, the fear of losing approval, the fear of being seen, the fear of starting over and looking foolish, the fear of becoming someone your past can no longer control. That fear doesn't protect your life, it protects your prison, and it will sound convincing. It will say, now isn't the time. It will say, you're not ready. It will say, What if everything falls apart? It will say, what will they think? Funny thing about fear, it often speaks in the voice of people who never had the courage to live their own truth. Their doubts become your inner dialogue. Their limits become your ceiling. Their need for comfort becomes your hesitation. But chosen one, you were not born to make your soul small enough to fit inside someone else's fear. You were not born to make your soul small enough to fit inside someone else's fear. You were not given a life just to become acceptable. You were not shaped through everything you've survived just to spend your days asking permission to breathe. The leap doesn't require perfect confidence. That's another myth. People wait for confidence like it's a bus that will eventually arrive if they stand still long enough. But confidence often comes after the step, not before it. The path appears under the foot that moves. A bird doesn't know the whole sky before it leaves the branch. It only knows the branch can no longer be home. Maybe that's where you are. The branch is shaking. The old place is familiar, but not alive. Staying feels safer, but it also feels like slow disappearance. Leaving feels terrifying, but somewhere underneath the fear, there's a tiny pulse of relief. A strange sense that even if the next chapter is hard, at least it would be honest. That tiny relief matters. Truth often arrives as relief before it arrives as certainty. When you imagine finally choosing yourself, there may be grief, yes, fear, yes, complexity, absolutely. Real life is not a clean motivational poster. Choices have consequences. People may not understand. Some doors may close. Some versions of you may have to die quietly. And honestly, that part can hurt more than expected. But grief is not proof that you made the wrong choice. Sometimes grief is simply the echo of leaving a place where you learned how to survive. You can mourn the old life and still know you can't return to it. You can love people and still outgrow the roles they expect you to play. You can feel afraid and still move. In many ancient stories, the hero doesn't begin as fearless. The hero begins as someone who can no longer remain where they are. The village becomes too small. The dream becomes too loud. The wound becomes a summons. And the road, uncertain as it is, begins calling louder than comfort. But notice something. The hero usually travels alone at first. Not because love doesn't exist, not because support doesn't matter, but because the deepest crossing cannot be outsourced. Nobody can enter your inner wilderness for you. Nobody can choose your truth on your behalf. Nobody can save you from the consequences of continuing to abandon yourself. No guru, no partner, no parent, no friend, no video. A message can awaken you. A teacher can point. A friend can hold your hand for part of the road. But the step is yours, and that's not meant to feel harsh. It's meant to set you free. Because if no one is coming to save you, then you no longer have to wait. You no longer have to sit at the edge of your life hoping someone else grants permission. You no longer have to postpone your becoming until everyone approves. You no longer have to treat your own freedom like a document waiting for signatures. The door is not locked from the outside. That realization can shake you. For a while, it may even make you angry, because waiting has been easier than choosing. Blaming has been easier than building. Hoping someone will change has been easier than admitting what you already know. But once that first sting passes, power returns. Not loud power, not arrogant power, the quiet kind, the kind that stands up inside you and says, maybe nobody is coming, but maybe that means it's time to come back to myself. That is the beginning of true responsibility, not blaming yourself for everything that happened. That would be cruel and false. Responsibility means deciding that what happened to you will not be the final author of you. It means admitting that even if someone else caused the wound, healing still asks for your participation. It means choosing not to spend your whole life living inside a story written by pain. And when you take that responsibility, even imperfectly, life starts responding differently. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you become present.